The villagers often spoke in hushed tones about the forbidden forest, a place where shadows stretched too long and the air whispered secrets only the wind could carry. Elders warned the young to stay away, their wrinkled faces darkening with stories of those who had wandered too far and never returned. But for Arun, curiosity was a fire that could not be tamed. Born to a lineage of skilled hunters, Arun possessed a sharp gaze and a heart that craved adventure. The tales of the black bird, its feathers darker than midnight, its eyes gleaming with an unnatural intelligence, haunted his thoughts. It was said to guard a secret beyond human understanding, a truth that led directly to the gates of heaven. No one had ever followed it and returned to tell the tale. One evening, as the last embers of daylight flickered behind the mountains, Arun stood at the forest's edge. The dense canopy loomed above him, thick with the scent of damp earth and ancient wood. He inhaled deeply, letting the untamed wilderness draw him in. His fingers tightened around the hilt of his hunting knife, a comfort rather than a necessity. He had no plans to hunt. His prey tonight was something far more elusive. A sudden rustle in the treetops made him pause. His muscles tensed as his eyes darted across the twisted branches. Then he saw it, a silhouette against the dying light. The blackbird. It perched on a gnarled tree limb, its head cocked to the side, as if it were studying him just as intently. The moment stretched between them, silent and charged, before the bird spread its wings and soared deeper into the forest. Arun hesitated only a second before following. The terrain grew treacherous as he ventured further in, roots twisting like the fingers of buried giants, the undergrowth clawing at his legs. The bird flitted ahead, never too far, never too close. It wanted him to follow. The deeper he went, the more the air changed. It thickened, humming with an energy that sent shivers along his spine. The trees grew impossibly tall, their trunks bearing scars that glowed faintly in the fading light. Arun knew these signs. His ancestors had spoken of them. Markers of a place untouched by time, a threshold between the mortal world and something greater. A low mist curled at his feet as he reached a clearing. At its center stood an ancient stone, its surface covered in intricate carvings that seemed to shift under his gaze. The black bird landed atop it, its feathers rippling like liquid obsidian. It let out a cry, the sound unlike any he had ever heard, both a warning and an invitation. Arun stepped closer, his breath shallow. The carvings pulsed as his fingers brushed against them, a warmth seeping into his skin. Images flooded his mind. Visions of a celestial kingdom bathed in golden light, a woman with eyes like the dawn reaching out to him, her voice lost in the wind. He staggered back, heart pounding. The bird caught again, breaking the trance. Arun turned his gaze upward, meeting its unblinking stare. He understood now. This was no ordinary bird. It was a guardian, a guide, and it had chosen him. A sharp gust of wind rushed through the clearing, carrying whispers that spoke of destinies yet to be fulfilled. Arun clenched his fists, determination hardening his resolve. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. He could not turn back now. The black bird took flight once more, vanishing into the shadows. Arun took a final breath and stepped forward, ready to follow wherever it led. The moment Arun stepped beyond the threshold of the clearing, the world around him unraveled. The trees bent and twisted as though bowing to an unseen force, and the air shimmered like the surface of a restless lake. A pulse of energy surged through his veins, pulling him forward until the ground beneath his feet softened into clouds. He stood at the edge of a sky bathed in hues of gold and indigo. Before him stretched a vast kingdom floating among the heavens, an ethereal city of ivory spires and glistening waterfalls that cascaded into nothingness. The air carried the scent of blooming jasmine and something unfamiliar, yet intoxicating. Arun barely had time to marvel at its beauty before a presence made itself known. A figure emerged from the mist, her form luminous against the celestial glow. She moved like flowing water, her hair cascading down her back like woven silk. Her eyes, deep and knowing, held him captive. He recognized her. She was the woman from his vision, the one whose touch had called him through the stone's carvings. "You have come," she said, her voice like the first breath of dawn. "But only those who seek with a pure heart may stay." Arun felt the weight of her words settle upon him. He had ventured into the unknown, drawn by curiosity and an unshakable sense of destiny. But he now realized this was no mere adventure. It was a trial, one he did not yet understand. He took a step closer, his pulse steady despite the overwhelming majesty of the place. "Who are you?" he asked. "I am Nyari," she answered, tilting her head as though measuring the sincerity of his question. "And you have been chosen." A gust of wind encircled them, lifting strands of her hair and sending ripples through the endless sky. Arun felt a presence beyond her, something vast and watchful, pressing against the edges of his consciousness. He had no doubt now. This place was alive, and it was judging him. "The black bird," he murmured, glancing around. "It led me here." Nyari's expression softened. "It has guided many, but few have passed the trials." The word sent a chill through him. He straightened, his fingers unconsciously brushing the hilt of his knife. "What must I do?" Nyari extended a hand, and as their fingers touched, the world dissolved. Arun found himself standing in a vast, open plain beneath a sky filled with swirling constellations. The land stretched infinitely, yet it pulsed with a presence more intimate than his own breath. A whisper brushed against his ear, though no one was near. "Love is not just a feeling," Nyari said, appearing beside him. "It is a force, a sacrifice, a test of the soul." Before Arun could respond, the ground beneath him shifted. Shadows coiled and took form, morphing into figures he recognized. His mother's sorrowful face, his father's stern gaze, the faces of his people. They looked at him, disappointment etched into their expressions. A heavy ache formed in his chest. "You abandoned them," the voices accused. "You chose yourself over duty." Arun staggered back, gripping his head as the words clawed at his mind. He had always been proud, always sought to carve his own path, but had his heart been selfish? Doubt crept in like a slow-moving poison. Nyari's voice wove through the chaos. "Love demands truth. You must face your fears or be consumed by them." Gritting his teeth, Arun forced himself to look into the eyes of his accusers. "I have followed my heart," he declared, his voice hoarse but unwavering. "If that is my crime, then let it be so." The figures wavered, their forms rippling before dissolving into mist. The sky above brightened, the suffocating weight lifting from his chest. A warmth spread through him, replacing fear with clarity. He turned to Nyari, breathless. "You have passed the first test," she said, though her gaze held something unreadable. "But one remains." The ground beneath them changed again, shifting into a lush valley where a single tree stood at its center. Its branches bore golden fruit, their scent rich and sweet. Nyari reached for one and placed it in his hand. "To stay, you must eat," she said. "But if you do, you can never return." Arun's grip tightened around the fruit. He had always longed for something greater than the life he had known. Here, in this kingdom, he had found wonder beyond imagination and a woman who set his soul ablaze. But with every heartbeat, memories of his home called to him. The faces of those who had raised him, the laughter of his kin, the duty he had yet to fulfill. He lifted his gaze to Nyari. "If I eat this, will you stay with me?" Pain flickered in her eyes, so brief he almost missed it. "I cannot." The truth struck like a blade. This kingdom was eternal, yet love, it seemed, was bound by its own rules. Arun exhaled slowly, the decision clear despite the ache in his chest. With steady hands, he set the fruit back upon the branch. Nyari reached for him, fingers brushing against his cheek in a touch as fleeting as morning mist. "You have chosen wisely." The world trembled. Light burst forth, and Arun felt himself being pulled away, back through the currents of time and space. The last thing he saw was Nyari's sorrowful smile before darkness swallowed him whole. Arun stood at the edge of the forest, the black feather clutched in his palm. The world around him was the same, yet he felt different, as if the air carried whispers only he could hear. The celestial kingdom had faded from his memory, but the weight of something unspoken lingered in his heart. The black bird perched on a nearby branch, watching him with its knowing eyes. It let out a single, piercing cry before taking flight, disappearing into the canopy above. He walked back to the village, each step carrying the strange sensation of returning to a place that should feel familiar, yet seemed distant. The scent of burning wood and fresh earth filled his senses as he crossed into the boundaries of home. Villagers paused to look at him, their gazes flickering with surprise and relief. His absence had been long enough to stir rumors, but not long enough for them to have given up hope. His mother was the first to reach him, her hands trembling as they traced the contours of his face. "You've been gone so long," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. Arun only nodded, unable to explain the passage of time that had felt both eternal and fleeting. Days passed, and life in the village resumed its rhythm. Arun went through the motions, hunting, gathering, tending to daily tasks, but a hollowness lingered. The black feather remained in his possession, a reminder of something just beyond his grasp. He would often find himself staring into the forest, waiting, listening, hoping for a sign. But the black bird did not return. One evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, Arun sat by the riverbank, the feather twirling between his fingers. He felt the gentle pressure of a presence beside him and turned to see an elder, a man who had seen more seasons than any other in the village. "You have been elsewhere," the elder said, his voice deep and knowing. Arun hesitated before nodding. "I cannot remember where," he admitted, frustration lacing his words. The elder smiled faintly. "Some journeys do not leave memories, only echoes." He reached out and touched the feather in Arun's hand. But even echoes can lead to truth, if you listen. That night, Arun dreamt of a vast sky filled with golden light, of a voice calling his name, of hands slipping from his grasp. He woke with a start, his pulse hammering, the black feather glowing faintly in the darkness. A realization settled over him. The answer was in the bird, the creature that had guided him, tested him, and now remained absent. Determined, he ventured into the forest at dawn. The trees whispered as he moved, their leaves rustling with unseen energy. He followed an invisible path, drawn forward by instinct rather than direction. Hours passed before he found himself in a clearing bathed in silver light. At its center stood the black bird, waiting. Arun approached cautiously, feeling the weight of something immense pressing down on him. The bird did not move. Instead, it gazed at him with eyes that gleamed with ancient wisdom. Slowly, its form began to shift. Feathers dissolved into light, wings stretched into arms, and before him stood the woman from the celestial palace, her presence as radiant as he had dimly remembered. "You found your way back," she said softly. 1,000 questions rose in Arun's throat, but only one escaped. "Who are you?" She smiled, sadness and warmth mingling in her expression. "I am what remains of a forgotten past, a guardian of those who seek truth beyond their world." She reached for the feather in his hand, closing his fingers around it. "And you, Arun, are the one who chose to remember." The forest around them seemed to pulse, the very fabric of reality shifting. Arun understood then. His journey had never been about reaching a hidden kingdom. It had been about understanding the nature of love, of sacrifice, of what it meant to hold on to something even when the world demanded he let go. Tears pricked his eyes as he whispered, "Will I see you again?" The woman cupped his face, her touch as light as mist. "In every story told, in every shadow cast by wings in flight, I will be there." She stepped back, and just as suddenly as she had appeared, she transformed once more, the black bird rising into the sky. Arun watched it disappear into the horizon, knowing that though the journey had ended, its truth would live within him forever. As he made his way back to the village, the feather now tucked close to his heart, Arun felt the weight of understanding settle upon him. He had walked into heaven and returned not with memories, but with something far more enduring, a secret written in the language of love, waiting to be told.